Welcome to the Backyard Bounty Podcast from HeritageAcresMarket.com, where we aim to educate and inspire you by sharing practical information to help your homestead thrive. And now, here's your host, Nicole.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Backyard Bounty. I'm your host, Nicole, and today I'm joined by Christine Webster from the People's Bees, and today we are going to look at beekeeping from a different angle and discuss the introspective benefits of beekeeping and learn some more about bee advocacy. So before we get into all of that, Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you share a little bit more about your business, about your beekeeping? I want to learn more about all of this.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor, Nicole. I can tell you that the People's Bees is based out of Denver, Colorado, so not too far from you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We are an urban beekeeping business, really rooted in education. So it's a little bit different than a lot of other beekeeping businesses where honey tends to be at the forefront. We love honey. We think that honey is a great incentive to teach people and inspire action to take better care of the world around us. And so we use honey as a little bit more of a tool rather than a condiment. So outreach is what we really focus on, and keeping honeybees themselves, but really as a gateway into all of the native bees we have here in the United States, and especially here in Colorado.
I really love that. I think when people think bees, they think honeybees, and they don't really think native bees. And I noticed that too, that I wasn't super aware of all the intricacies of Mother Nature, and I'd never really considered native bees until I got into beekeeping. And then I think I became more fascinated by natives than I did our honeybee friends. But like you, I think honey's great, but really it's not why I do it. So I totally understand that. So what kind of educational outreach do you do through the People's Bees?
I'll go ahead and just start by saying that the People's Bees is a young and new business. It really started as a backyard hobby, as it does for many professional beekeepers, but it has quickly, over the last 3 years, really bloomed into a full-time business. For me specifically, as the founder and director, and I have plenty of assistants as well, but we are a young operation. So given that, we are constantly working on forming new partnerships. So to answer your question, partnerships, the ones that we currently have are with Denver Public Libraries, Denver Public Schools. We have a partnership with a small local private family farm, which is actually where we keep our apiary, which is our teaching location. We also have a partnership with Same Cafe, which is located in Capitol Hill neighborhood of Denver. They're a wonderful nonprofit organization that prepares mostly locally sourced food, produce, to create healthy dishes that are available to anyone for any price. It's a pay what you can cafe. So we donate honey to them. It's a really awesome partnership. And as of the last couple of months, we are now partnered with a couple great Colorado-based companies, Outward Hound, which is a pet toy company out of Centennial, and Breckenridge Brewery, which is a small craft brewery that is now part of the Anheuser-Busch portfolio. So we've been busy.
It sounds like
working
it.
on
My
these
goodness.
Partnerships. Yeah, we've been busy working on these partnerships because I really believe that partnerships, collaboration is what brings out the best in people. And I really do believe in the concept of being stronger together and bringing ideologies from different areas together for a common goal. I think can accomplish a lot. And so it has been really exciting partnering anywhere from, libraries to breweries, right? Like it's a ton of different perspectives. And I'm able to reach out to such a broader audience, right? In exciting and maybe unexpected ways.
Sure.
It's a little disruptive.
Yeah. Well, that's really, really exciting. And, I love the variation there. So what is your beekeeping background, and how did you decide or fall into, if that's the case, this beekeeping as a business?
Yeah, definitely fell into it.
That usually
more
seems to
just
be how it goes.
yeah, yeah, like truly, because no one grows, as a child says, I want to grow up to be a beekeeper. Well, maybe there are some really special people who do, but I'm going to go to beekeeping school.
Right.
It is it typically is a trade, a career that's pursued by, farm kids, or maybe it's in their lineage, their family. Maybe it's more of a family tradition. But for me, it is a very unexpected path. Just as a lot of the work I just mentioned that I do comes from unexpected and creative places. So my background is in marketing and advertising. I'm a designer by trade, to put it simply, a
Okay.
graphic designer. But I spent about 12 years working at large and small agencies between Chicago and Denver, and I burned out.
Mm.
I burned out. I don't know how I lasted as long as I did, to be honest with you, but moving to Denver from Chicago 4 years ago was instrumental in my growth as a beekeeper. It all started with having my first backyard. My partner and I had never had land. We had always been in apartments, at least 3 stories up. And so I felt very disconnected from the natural world for a very long time. So renting our first house with our first backyard, I went bonkers, with the opportunity to learn how to grow things I was never taught. Gardening, raising our own food. That's the idea of self-sufficiency in a more natural way was just never a part of my upbringing. And so I really explored that, and naturally was pointed towards ecosystems and how they work, right? I was also in a totally new environment coming from the Midwest. This is a new region. The little I knew about plant life back in the Midwest, it wasn't really of too much use here, just because the region, the microclimates, the elevation, humidity, everything is just so different. So one thing led to another. And I also noticed that in Denver, there are a lot of beekeepers. Even
Hmm.
4 years ago, there were a lot of beekeepers. And a neighbor of mine, I caught inspecting one of his hives in his front yard. And so I left a note at his door politely to ask if I could just shadow him. And he graciously took me under his wing and showed me the ropes, and I was hooked. I certainly didn't dive in with my own hives right away. I was just joking with my partner the other day that I think I somehow subconsciously knew it was not just going to be a fun little hobby. I had a feeling it was going to be a really big deal in my life. So, yeah, I spent a year studying beekeeping, shadowing as many beekeepers as I possibly could, looking for that perfect mentor that I could really build a relationship with, going to bee club, etc. Since then, I have been progressively increasing my beekeeping operation the last 3 years. And that brings me to today. This year is the first year I've gone full time with the people's bees. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's been a long journey. I've learned a lot. I have been humbled in many ways, and I just continue to learn. It's an incredible experience. I want that for everyone. The reason why I decided to go full time with the People's Bees this year is, especially coming out of this pandemic, or still being in it seemed like there couldn't possibly be any better time to really just shake things up, considering the state of our society. So, if there's anything that the last year and a half has taught me, it's that take risks. Take risks, and certainly listen to yourself and honor your desires. And so I took a leap of faith, and I'm moving ahead with the People's Bees, and it's been a really awesome season.
Well, it sounds like it's all heading in the right direction. So that's exciting. So as you mentioned that you've learned a lot during your beekeeping journey, what is like the biggest or maybe the most surprising thing that you've learned along the way?
Mm. There's so much. I mean, it's just pure education, especially when it's not how you were wired to begin with. Certainly, it's been more than just learning, it's been a transformation for me personally. But community, man, the bees have really taught me a lot about community, cooperation. Maybe that's a little bit of a cliche answer in the beekeeping world, but there's so much to that. I think there's a lot to be said about what not only bees, but insects and the entire animal kingdom, really, ecosystems can teach us about how robust systems can operate. And that's why it's so much more than just bees. It's getting into the world. It's living in the world, the big aspects of it, the micro aspects of it, right? The insect world that we so easily overlook, and observing it and learning from it. So yeah, anyway, I think there's learning how these robust systems work is been one of the biggest things that I've learned. And I do take that with me every day. It gives me a lot to think about. And I think it's changed my outlook on life for sure.
I can totally understand that. So I know that in the beginning, mentioned that we were going to talk about the introspective benefits of beekeeping, which was a topic that you suggested when we were talking about what we were going to talk about. And I really thought that that was an interesting topic that's, beekeeping, but not directly related to beekeeping in and of itself. So, can you kind of expand on that a little bit and tell us what some of these, in your opinion, what some of these introspective benefits are?
Yeah, definitely. It's a nice segue too. I'm going to go ahead and quote a really well known beekeeper out of San Diego, Hillary Kearney. It's a turn of phrase that she uses often, that honeybees are the gateway bug. Which is really a really sticky phrase, right? But it's so true. Honeybees are the gateway bug into the insect world. And I think us humans can very often, I mean, we're just almost groomed, programmed to not be able to really relate to insects, right? There's nothing, I'm not sure there's anything more foreign to us than insects. Even plants, I think we can relate to more. But insects, our relationship, our very ancient relationship with honeybees is a little bit different. There's a relationship there, probably very driven by this wonderful product that they, produce. But there's no doubt that they're super captivating, and there is an interesting relatability to them. So, in working with honeybees, again, as the gateway bug, really has, for me anyway, and my students, people I have brought into the apiary, taught beekeeping lessons to, or just given experiences to. I offer tours to companies for team outings. And one of the biggest takeaways that they often get is just how surprisingly relatable the bug world is. And I think that it shifts perspective almost immediately. We see these behaviors, we tend to just naturally and understandably anthropomorphize bees as we are working with them, honeybees in this situation. But we see behaviors in them that we notice in ourselves too. We see them eat. These are things that we don't see out in the field, out in our garden necessarily. We see foraging, but we don't get to see them physically interacting with one another. They use the trophallaxis process to generate honey, right, within the hive. Opening that hive really shows us into that world. Like I said, seeing them eat, seeing them talk to each other, seeing them defend their home. These are all things that we can, as humans, as mammals, really relate to. And then to take it further, talking about royal jelly and this sort of likeness to mammals in the mammal world, mother's milk. And that always blows my students' minds too. And so just in the matter of an hour or two of a lesson in my apiary, I feel like the bees, for those willing to allow it to happen, the bees have so much to teach us about ourselves, kind of just in a way returning to our basic needs, our feelings as sentient creatures, and maybe reconsidering that insects aren't too different. So I always end my lessons talking to my students about honeybees. I always try to tie it all up with the fact that they're not a native species to North America, and that there are so many overlooked bees and insects in the world, and the odds are against them. And so after that, after everything we had learned during a lesson, or even when I have talks, at that point, I feel like I have people's ears and they understand, they can relate a little bit better, and they want to do something about it. So, yeah, there's a lot of introspection. As a matter of fact, what comes to mind on this particular topic is I love a good trade. I traded a beekeeping lesson with a lovely yoga instructor here in Denver. And I mean, yoga is the practice of introspection. And she got so much out of that. And we had our yoga flow right after the lesson. And we took so much of our learnings into that meditation. It was really awesome. I think those two things go together nicely, personally.
I agree. I've noticed several similarities between meditation and yoga and beekeeping. So, agreed.
Yeah, I know from your website, I know that you also practice and appreciate yoga. Do you mind if I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
Do you ever combine the two? Do you ever meditate with your bees?
I think unintentionally, just because the while beekeeping, it is all consuming. You've got to be physically and mentally present and everything. So I guess unintentionally, I do. I haven't, made the conscious decision of while doing this, I'm going to go into that space. I know that after beekeeping, I always feel, much more relaxed and rejuvenated, unless it's super hot outside, like I do after meditation.
Yeah, same.
Is that something that you've combined?
It is not. Well, I participated. I don't lead any kind of meditations, but it's actually something that I'm definitely interested in kind of exploring with someone who has the expertise in that. I think that there is something to that, and I completely hear you. Beekeeping in and of itself, actual inspections, being inside of the hive requires that focus, but also that relaxation. So it's a really lovely feeling, and it's something I love sharing with my students afterwards. I always ask them, "How do you feel now that you just spent 2 hours in this hive?" And they're just like, I'm floating, I'm floating. I'm so zenned out. And I love that. Everyone deserves that feeling. And, there are many things that can get us there, but bees are another unexpected and a wonderful way to do that. And also connect with the world around us, really drop our guards too. On this topic, another service that the People's Bees offers is residential hive hosting, something a lot of beekeepers offer. It's backyard beekeeping, but at other people's houses. So
Mhm.
I do have clients who are willing to pay for me to tend to my own hives on their property so that they in turn receive the benefits of a honey share at the end of the season and pollination services. So a lot of my clients are, big time gardeners. It's really worth it for them. But quite a few of them actually sit out next to the hive in the morning, not too close. We go through a little bit of initial training before placing the hive. They know better, but they spend time with their bees. And they sit with it, whether it's a cup of tea, cup of coffee, or even at the end of the day with a beer or something, glass of wine, and they just relax and they unwind. And I have one client in particular who deliberately meditates with them. And I just think that that's so amazing that that's not something I suggested. People are finding that. And what a healthy way to spend time outdoors, right?
Yeah. I've done hive hosting with just two individuals, and it was something that I had to step away from. I just didn't have the time for it anymore. But both of them actually went on to become beekeepers themselves, but they would do the same thing, sit out with the hive and all that. And just, I never really thought about it before. And this is super left field, but I'm going to have to look it up now. I really like to do the apps and things that use like beta sound waves and stuff for like meditation and
Oh,
whatnot.
yeah.
And I wonder,
ASMR.
yeah, I wonder, the buzz of the hive. I wonder if that kind of feeds into one of those sound waves that tend to encourage, the meditation and stuff.
I have definitely thought about this. Nicole, let's hop on this endeavor.
Yes.
Let's work on this together because both of us definitely need more projects. But no,
Right.
I genuinely love that this idea. I have thought about it, and I'd be really curious about a little bit of research or studies on non-beekeepers reaction to the hum of the hive,
Hmm.
because for you and I it's relaxing.
Right.
But I can't expect that for everyone. That might
Sure.
stress some people out, but it might be a niche market, but worth considering.
Yeah. I mean, they have yoga and goats. Why not yoga and bees?
Right. Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I have a beekeeper friend. If I can give her a shout out,
Sure.
her name is Ali Pignon, and she's out of Mississippi. She is the founder and director of Dreaming the Bee, and she's actually here in Denver now, visiting, and she does a lot of spiritual work with her honeybees as a beekeeper, and she shares that with a lot of people too. So I'm looking forward to when we meet up for lunch tomorrow, a nice bee meditation in my apiary in Lakewood.
Interesting. Yeah. Is that something that you are going to share on your Instagram, or is that something that you're going to keep more private?
I might. Yeah, no, I actually, I might. Would you be interested in seeing that? Because if
Yeah. Yeah, I think
people
you
are
should
interested,
share it.
maybe we'll do that. I'll talk to Allie about it. We met at bee camp a few years ago now, and she's a lovely person. And I think what she's doing with her bees is really wonderful. So yeah, I should share that. That's a good idea.
Yeah. And we'll put her information in the show notes too so that folks can check that out if they're interested. So, with beekeeping, how have you noticed that it's promoted bee advocacy with either yourself or with folks that attend one of your events?
What I try to do with the people's bees is advocate for bee awareness in general, but everything that touches that. So that is, I always make sure to address how we garden, how we live on, for those of us who have land, how we manage that land, how we grow food, how we, not that I'm necessarily an expert on that, but I certainly want to be a part of that conversation and start that conversation knowing where our food comes from. So I'm an advocate for environmental stewardship in general. And it begins for the people's bees, it begins with bees, but it ends with a much bigger picture. And so, whether it's an educational happy hour we're producing or a pop up event at Cherry Creek State Park, we're talking to people about, sharing the wonder of bees, but then ending on the note of empowering them with what they can do at home. There's so much understood by beekeepers and scientists, especially about bees and the greater insect world, but there's so little understood by the general public. That really ties in with our mission is connecting to people, breaking down those barriers, helping them to feel more comfortable and less intimidated with what they really can do to make a positive difference, even if it's yard by yard, but within your neighborhood. So there's making that point and starting that conversation honestly with a group of people. But I also tap into my design skills in my past life to develop materials that I can hand out and leave people with to pass along or utilize for themselves. There's so much more growth there. I look forward to doing so many things that there's just not enough time in the world. But in the meantime, I see myself as a communicator. I've always been a visual communicator, and now I'm just exercising other communication muscles with the people's bees. So at the end of the day, the advocacy comes through communication and connecting with people.
Well, I definitely agree. I think you're a great communicator. What are some of the suggestions that you give folks, either current or potential beekeepers or folks that are just, not really interested in becoming a beekeeper, but interested in doing more for bees? What are some of the suggestions that you give them?
Plant native plants. It's so simple. As I've learned too, again, it wasn't that long ago that I didn't have my own yard or really understand how gardens even work. But what I've learned through courses I've taken, programs I've attended, conferences, books, it's the most powerful thing we can do is to restore the land that we do have, even if it's a windowsill, even for those of us in apartments, whether it's a windowsill or a balcony or, I'm just on 6,000 square feet of a lot or up to, acres of land. Restoring some of that is the simplest and most powerful and inexpensive thing that we can be doing. So I always tell people to start there. Start with native plants. Start by making some friends at the garden center nearest to you, preferably a small local business, to support them. And then from there, establishing your foundation of plant life and understanding what grew there before you and before our sterile turf lawns, which I'm really opposed to given what I've learned and what our science shows. But from there, learning more about land management, our property management, and to use pesticides or not? Is it necessary? So I have this takeaway card that I include at every in-person event that I should make available online too. It's a very tiny little business card. So it's very compact. It's easy, it's affordable to produce and hand out, that teaches people alternative ways of managing our properties. So I feel really passionately about being a part of the movement to break the stigma about weeds, about native plants, and move forward without turf grass and sod and green lawns. And we certainly need change in that area. So those are the first two things that I tell people. The third thing is the idea of creating habitat, which we're kind of already doing by restoring the land a little bit with native plants and then abstaining from the toxic poisons that we conventionally reach for, especially here in the suburbs. I'm still technically in Denver, but we're right on the edge, and it feels a little suburban. But then the third thing is creating habitat, and that is paying even closer attention to where certain areas of our backyards, or again, our windowsills, are allocated. So explaining, and it's such a nice segue into native bees, talking about cavities in reeds and stalks of grass and old dried out wood and loose soil and the importance of that, and telling people about my own backyard. So yeah, those are the top three things that I tell people that they can easily do starting the next day, and just how impactful that can actually be. And most people are really excited to just get started on that.
I think that's some really great points. And along the way, just to reaffirm what you've said in interviewing lots of different bee experts and researchers and stuff on the podcast, they have all said that same thing. So I think that that's really great. And not just for bees, but for all insects and birds and pollinators. That includes bats, which a lot of folks forget about. Not so much here, but in other places. But yeah, I think those are some really great actionable things that are easy and cost effective and come with lots of benefits.
I had included in the questionnaire, turning the focus back on you to see if there was any, and I don't know if you want to talk about that. I love having balanced conversations.
Oh, sure.
What is something with Heritage Acres? You produce so much quality content. And so there must be, I know I deal with this, so I'm maybe projecting a little bit, but things that you've been meaning to get to, just something, a small project for Heritage Acres, or maybe outside of your business that you've been meaning to get to?
Oh, gosh, there are so many things that I would like to do. I just don't even know where to begin. And I'm not used to being the guest
Sure.
on my own podcast. So thank you.
I know. I'm sorry. I've been looking forward to meeting you. And so I don't mean to turn the table.
No, it's quite all right. I would say that on the business side of things, I'm really trying to create educational resource for folks that are interested in learning more. I want to create more content about chicken health, like health and wellness and diseases and stuff, and more beekeeping content. In general, I'd like to do more video content, more video podcasts, more than taking those videos and breaking them down into, like smaller bite-sized pieces. With the podcast, I'm looking forward to making some advancements there and trying to not only do more video, but more quality video, doing some more listener engagement. So having people not only submit questions, but the ability to have them like call in live and answer questions, and then live streaming too. And then, having a guest and live streaming it so that folks can either call in or like in a chat thing, put questions. So those are some things I'm trying to work on behind the scenes. I have basically a full-time job and a family and the business. And so it takes longer to get everything put together than I think it's going to be. I keep thinking, I'll do this tomorrow. And then 6 months from now, I'm still working on it. But that's
I hear you. And especially you're talking about video content, and that's just so many people who are producing content like you and I may not realize what really goes into that.
Yeah.
So much goes into that.
Yep. I think it's a great resource, but yeah, lots of work.
Yeah. Well, what you've already shared with the world is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best of luck in tackling those things because I can relate to having just a never ending list. A question for maybe both of us.
Sure.
You being a beekeeper yourself, what I've observed in my 3 to 4 years in this community of beekeepers, there's an evolution happening. Well, there's a renaissance in beekeeping happening, no doubt, but it's evolving. And I'm a part of that. I'm happy to be a part of that. Beekeeping is not what it used to be. It's not just about honey or wax. We've got, migratory beekeeping now as a commercial service and very uniquely here in the United States. But then we also have independent communicators, educators, such as myself and so many other brilliant people. What do you think we could use more of in the beekeeping community as this evolution continues?
Two things come to mind, and the two things would be I don't know if I want to go with kindness or patience or compassion, but one of those, a combination thereof. And yes. And education. The first part of it being, I see so many folks that are brand new and looking for help, especially on social media, and they get some less than kind responses. Not defending the mean people, but sometimes people post without attempting to find the answer on their own, which I think is a good first step. Try to be self-sufficient and look up these answers, as much as possible. But I do see people post questions and just get a barrage of different answers. Some of them less kind than others, and unfortunately, I think that sometimes beekeepers are grumpy. I don't know why. It just seems to kind of be a trend among some beekeepers. So I would say that the first part of it. And then the second part of it, there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to certain beekeeping practices. Everything from the hives themselves to mite treatments to, bee health and nutrition and all of that. I'm a big fan of facts, I guess. So I would like to see more fact-based information instead of just, hearsay or assumptions or unintentional misinformation, I guess.
No, that's a solid response. I totally agree with you. The rule I now work by is don't talk about anything you don't know about.
Sure.
and that I'm not completely sure about. And it's because I too have made the mistake of maybe guessing a little bit too much or going in with a little bit too much confidence. And this is, where the humility comes into, especially entering an industry that I've not been in for a super long period of time. But to catch myself and to be okay with just saying, I'm not sure.
Sure.
Talk to this person, and lift up other beekeepers, the more seasoned and experienced ones, the entomologists. I mean, goodness, they don't get enough credit.
Yeah.
That's who I'm learning from. Researchers and entomologists and ecologists. So I live by giving credit where credit is due and, avoiding specific topics that I may not know enough about or have enough credibility about. So I think that is really important. I think that to your point about people maybe reaching out for help without maybe doing their due diligence, I really agree with that too. But we're in the age of information. Come on, everything's available. We've got books, we've got internet, and we do have community. We have forums, but with that, the kindness and compassion to direct people accordingly. But we're in the age of information, but also in an age, an era of wanting that immediate gratification, right? To just like simply like tell me exactly what to do,
right,
instead of embracing the process of beekeeping,
Yes.
right? Or anything that requires an incredible amount of patience, working with nature, unpredictable elements of our jobs. So I echo everything that you say. I really agree with that. The community could benefit from those things as well. In addition to everything you said, I would like to see more conservation efforts in beekeeping. And that is the path that I'm on. And I have a ways to go. But that is what I get the most excited about. I love beekeeping. I love the farming aspect of my work. But I have to tell people that. I recently wrote about this on Instagram, and I'd like to write a little more long form opinion about this. I've had people reach out, especially in the last year. Numbers show beekeeping is, skyrocketing, and popularity in this country, there's a misconception that beekeeping is saving bees.
Yes.
And to your point at the top of this interview, that people commonly think of bees and they think honeybees. And so I'm on a little mission to correct that and join scientists in amplifying that message that there are well over 20,000 species of bees that no one's talking about. I definitely don't keep bees and pretend like I'm saving all of the bees because it's just simply not true. And I've had some beekeepers, friends of mine, actually even tell me, like, you need to pick a side on that. And I don't know that that's true. I don't think that there are sides. I think that farmers can be advocates and conservationists too. I think that we can do these things with conservation in mind. And so I continue to explore that, and I continue to, challenge that perspective, because what we need, I think, more than ever is a broader view of what conservation is, and making sure not to swirl that in too much with non-native beekeeping efforts here. So I love keeping honeys, but I want to talk about all the bees.
Sure.
So that's what I'd like to see more of in our industry and community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And the more that I learn about keeping honeybees, the more I wonder if I'm doing more harm than good. But they definitely take away from the natives.
Sure.
And in the words of Randy Oliver, when I had him on a previous podcast, they are an introduced non-native livestock. They are not intended to be part of our ecosystem per se. They're introduced. So, you always have to be concerned about introduced species.
Absolutely.
Outside of their ecosystem, and how they may benefit or may cause detriment to other species accordingly.
Love Randy Oliver.
Yes.
You've had so many cool people on your podcast.
Thank you.
Congratulations on all of that. It's amazing. Dr. Gene Krisky,
yes.
too. Oh my gosh.
He's so fun.
Such a great episode. Yeah, he is. Just listening to him that's the level of enthusiasm that I try to bring into the people's bees too, is to just get people jazzed about bugs. That's what I think the greater science world needs, is communicators and enthusiasm and engagement. Yeah, I think I'm very transparent about the fact that honeybees, that I'm keeping a non-native livestock species, and my hope is to continue to grow in my conservation efforts too, and explore what that means to me and how I can creatively incorporate that. But yeah, I think being aware of that and not taking, I just feel like too many beekeepers, especially novice beekeepers, take too much credit in saving bees. And I just think we should be really honest with ourselves and really careful about that, because there's just bigger and really exciting conversations to have beyond the world of honeybees too. It's just for the people's bees, it's a great starting point, but it's not the end all by any means.
Sure. Agreed. Well, I think you do a great job of bringing excitement and encouragement in the beekeeping world. So for folks that want to get more information, where can we find you?
Oh, follow us on Instagram at The People's Bees. That's where we're the most active. Also our website, www.thepeoplesbees.com. And if you are local to the greater Denver area, keep an eye on our website and sign up for our newsletter for events coming up. Certainly things are contingent on COVID. However, we have quite a few in-person events coming up outdoors. So really excited to just connect with people. Honey season is upon us. And while we are not a honey producer, we will have a little bit to share and teach people where that comes from and a little bit more about what we do. So
awesome. Well, definitely
give us a follow. Check us out.
Yeah, if you're in the Denver area, definitely try to attend one of the in-person events. And then, of course, we'll put all of the links in the show notes so that folks can find you there. And with that being said, Christine, thank you so much for your time today. I think this was a really interesting conversation. I love looking at things from, some different viewpoints, mixing it up a little bit. And I very much appreciate your time and your knowledge today.
Thank you so much, Nicole. This has been wonderful.
I enjoyed it so much.
Me too.
And for those listening, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you again next week.
For a behind-the-scenes sneak peek, receive episode notifications, or leave a question or comment for the show, text the word podcast to 719-292-3207 or visit heritageacresmarket.com/podcast.